Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Similarly Different. Now we are coming to the end almost of this season, and I feel like I was talking to my team about what this season entirely relays, and if I had to say a word, it's unmasking. And I have talked to you guys about so many things, and in these last two episodes, I wanted to have a dear guest, which is Carla, here with me, to not only be able to talk about her journey and the great work that she has done in over 10 years in her life in sex trafficking, but to be able to feel comfortable to finally talk about something I've gone through that I've actually never spoken about publicly, but do it in a way where if you have ever dealt with anything like this, or you have ever come across somebody that has, or even something different, anything traumatizing, you are able to not only hear my experience and how I went through it, but get some tips on how to maneuver through it in life, or if you are a friend, a family member, know how to assist that person.
Yeah.
So thank you for being on this episode.
I am fired up to be here.
I am
This is
so
my
nervous.
jam.
My hands are sweating out of nowhere. I'm just like, oh my God.
That's the next step.
So for
you.
those that don't know you,
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have been doing in the last 10 years plus of your life?
I have been married 34 years. I have a 32 and a 29-year-old, and I never thought I would be in the space of restoring victims out of sex trafficking. Before that, I worked with women in crisis, just basically women in marriage crisis, for about 15 years. So I did a lot of just face-to-face, hand-to-hand working with women who were in crisis in their marriage. So then that led me into the sex trafficking work, where girls were rescued, brought to our safe house, and we just rebuilt them from the ground up. Now we decided to take everything we did in the safe house and bring it out to the whole world, because there are so many women who are walking with trauma that's really deeply hidden, that they've told no one about for a million reasons. But now we just want to bring the tools, because I want to see women rise up out of those ashes.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being in this episode. I have been talking to you guys about so many different parts of my life, from my childhood to my marriage and divorce, but there is something that I haven't spoken about, and it's something that happened 16 years ago. And I have Carla here to be able to walk me through it and just be very raw and vulnerable with you guys, and just finally unmask it entirely. Because just like I've said in other episodes, I'm not perfect. I'm not this idea that a lot of people have on social media. And I think that many women are. There's so many different layers to us and so many different seasons that we go through and experiences. But more than anything, this podcast is supposed to be that if you have gone through something, you don't have to carry it. You don't have to let it be the thing that holds you back. So am I just saying it? Okay. So at the age, oh my God, why is this happening? Okay. At the age of 17, I had a stalker that I wasn't aware of. And he ended up going to jail for kidnapping, attempted murder, attempted rape. And it started and ended within a few hours. But it was something that really traumatized me. And for many years, even with being on social media, it was something that I was very confused as to why I would get on social media without being on social media. I had attracted somebody like that with ill intent. And I think that it's really important to talk about it today, 16 years later, because I have worked through it intensely, but I think that there's many women that have gone through their own forms of trauma and think that they have to look, act, choose to be in certain spaces or carry it more than anything. And I think the carrying of it is the most difficult part, the blame, the why. And for me, am I now a target that's going to happen? Is this going to happen again? So thank you for being here to allow me to share that.
Yeah. I've spent countless hours with girls who were violated to ways you could never imagine, sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally. They were drugged. They were all the things that you could ever imagine. And then to be able to walk out the very tenderness of recalling those memories is a very fine line. And to know how to process those things. So I just want to encourage you right now and everybody listening that I immediately saw proof of what our subconscious mind does when we recall a very terrifying memory.
Yeah.
Which is your hands start sweating, your eyes start tearing up, you're nervous, you can feel that tension in your back, in your neck, in your face.
Yeah.
That is the recollection of trauma on your body. And so the reason I say that is that first I want to applaud you for bringing this up and giving people who might hear this a chance to understand that. If you can take that expression you just had, like immediately you started to cry, just the very slight recollection of that traumatic event, if you don't deal with it in the right way, that trauma, that response that you just had, I just wrote down the recalling of trauma and what it brought to you. I was writing that down while it was happening. If you don't deal with that, which I'm so proud of you for doing this and calling people that are listening to do the same, then those tensions, those responses get pushed down. And when they get pushed down over years, they downregulate your cells. And the cells in your whole body get out of ease, which is ease is like healthy rhythm. Dis-ease is the opposite. Dis-ease is where we get the word disease. So without dealing with it and talking about it, your body will turn into disease, period.
Yeah.
End of story, one way or another. So tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. Listen, the other thing I want to say is you don't have to tell details that you don't want to because, and I want to encourage people listening that when you start processing these kind of things, make sure you're with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you're with somebody who does not understand, they can make further injuries. They could take it to a place where it actually makes you not feel validated. They make you think that you deserved it or you shouldn't have been there. Or if you hadn't done this, that wouldn't have happened. So then it further traumatizes the recovery. So that's the first thing I want to say is make sure whoever's listening that they will process that correctly. But you can tell me whatever you want. You don't have to go into detail. You can just tell whatever you want about what happened and how it happened.
Yeah. So a lot of it I actually found out afterwards, like certain pieces. But from the day of when it happened, it was actually, Courtney doesn't know this, but the anniversary was 2 days ago. It was so crazy. It showed up on my phone. So it was a hot summer day in Miami. And there was, I guess you can say, a trend that I would stay at my friend's house every few days, every few weeks. It was a way for me to be able to just reset and refresh. And I had a meetup point where my friend would come pick me up by where I lived. So I actually went to the pool in my complex and I used the cell phone because the cell phone that I had at the time got damaged just a little bit before that. And I went and I used the cell phone of a guy that was at the pool, and I called her and I said, hey, kind of need to go to your house for a few days. Can you pick me up? She said, yeah, of course. She happened to call back like 5 or 10 minutes later, but I already had left the pool and started walking to the meetup point. When she called back, it was to say that her mom's Tahoe, which is the car that they would share, and she was like, so I'm going to have to wait for my mom to get home. I didn't know that. So I start walking to the meetup point, which was behind a bus station. And I'm just standing there and it's a really hot day. So at that point, I used to work like 3 or 4 blocks up in a tanning salon. And I'm like, maybe I should just walk to the tanning salon and, just call from there and see what happened because this is unlike her. So I start walking and I don't look my best that day. I had been through some stuff prior to that. I had been crying, and so I was wearing baby blue Brazilian jeans and a long sleeve yellow shirt, flowy shirt. And I started walking on the sidewalk to my job, and a 1991 black Honda Civic pulled up. And, they tried to make conversation with me. And instantly I was like, I was just so out of it. I was not trying to talk to anybody. I was just trying to go. I was trying to get to my friend's house. So I just dismissed them. They made a U-turn and came back around again. And they were like, hey, do you need money? Are you okay? They could tell that, you know, my hair was a little messy. They could tell that I had probably been crying. I don't know. It was a hot day. I don't know what was going through their mind. They kept going around, and like after a few minutes, they would come back and be like, hey, do you need a phone? Do you need this? Do you need that? Long story short, I ended up in this person's car. After some persuading and force, I ended up in this person's car. And I remember when I realized I was in this car, my friend had passed away the year prior, Pam. And I remember I looked up and I was like, I don't know what's about to happen, but God, Pam, if you're here, please protect me. I remember I tried opening the door, and that's when I realized something was wrong because it was child lock. So I was like, okay. So the first thing I did was take off my seatbelt. And I used to watch Law and Order SVU a lot. So I just started looking around. And when I started looking around, I was like, what can I remember from this car? And I remembered that there was an LED blue skull in his air vent. And I remember that he had a Mexican flag on a toothpick in another part of his air vent. But then he pulled out an album of CDs, like a long one. And he was like, I made a romantic playlist. Choose one of the CDs that you want to listen to. And I just kept telling him, can you just please take me to a phone? I really need to call my friend. I need to go to my friend's house. Like, I'm not going to say anything. I just really need you to take me to the phone. So in this part of Miami, there's a Shell gas station in Kendall. And he started driving towards it. And I was like, okay, I don't know what just happened. I'm really like hazy at this point. But I was like, I just need this man to like be my friend and take me to the gas station. So he drives into the gas station through one of the entrances. And then I start instantly trying to open the door before he even gets to the telephone, to the payphone. And he drives out diagonally through the other one. And I was like, he just tricked me. He was never going to take me to the phone. And then he just puts his hand on my thigh and he's like, I need you to relax. So then I'm just like, okay, yeah. And it's the entrance of the highway. So at that time in Florida, there was SunPass. And it was either a toll or a SunPass. And you either had a SunPass and it would swipe you through, or you had to pay the toll. So he starts going to the toll lane. And at this point, I'm just like, I need to get the freak out of this car. So I go and I try to open. I start hyperventilating.
Sure you did.
So I start putting the window down. And he lets me put the window down. And I just say, okay, if it's child lock, when he gets to the toll, I don't have a seatbelt on, I'm going to open the door. And at this time, he keeps talking to me. And I start realizing that he knows me. And I'm like, he knows my schedule. He knows when I was going to school. He knew where my bus stop was for school. And he knew my uniform that I would wear to school. And I start realizing that he used to go to work every day when I would walk to the school bus. And he started realizing my pattern and knew my uniform, knew at what time the bus would pick me up, knew at what time the bus would drop me off. And he was just like, you're just so pretty. I've been always wanting to talk to you. And he starts getting to the toll, and there was a red Chevrolet coming up right next to him. And I go and I open the door. And when I go and I open the door, he swerves and goes through SunPass. And as much as that scared me, I'm so thankful for it now because of how they ended up catching him. But he ends up swerving, goes through the SunPass, and actually on the way out almost hits the red car. And now we're on the highway. And I'm like, okay. So he was like, you're being difficult. I'm telling you to calm down, and you're not calming down. So I need you to calm down. So he gets in the middle lane of the highway because he doesn't trust me at this point. I've lost his trust. And again, I used to watch so many law shows that I was like, I'm losing here. This is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm not making him my friend. So he keeps on the highway for a good like 30, 35 minutes, felt like hours. And he drives all the way down south, which funny enough, is literally the area where my friend lives.
Wow.
So he gets off in an area called Country Walk. And if anybody is from Miami, they know that by the zoo, at least back in the day in 2007, 2008, I don't know if it's still there, but there's this FedEx that was really deserted. It was all warehouses and one single FedEx. To the right of the FedEx is just bushes. I don't know if they've built now, but there was no buildings yet. And right in front of the FedEx, there was warehouses. So during this whole time, he's just talking to me and he's telling me, going back to the CDs, about how he made specific romantic playlists for us to listen to on our car ride, that he just wants me to calm down. He, at this point, has grabbed my leg and put it over the shift. And it's just touching my knee. But I'm confused as to why the need to do that. I don't know if it was because he knew I was going to try to jump again or what. So he has my leg there and I'm just frozen and I'm quiet. He gets off the highway. The moment he gets off the highway and he starts heading towards the Metro Zoo area, I'm like, okay, there's another Shell gas station. And I start again, like, I just really want to call my friend. Like, if I promise, like, we can act like this never happened. At this point, like, I'm maybe in his car for like 45 minutes to an hour. And then he does it again, the drive-through diagonal. And I just start crying at that point because I'm like, you're taunting me. But then when he gets out of that gas station, he makes a right and he starts driving down this street. Now, by Metro Zoo, when you drive down the street at this time, I don't know how it is now, but like there was apartments all on the left side and there's a park on the right. The park is all green and it has a basketball court. I remember there was like 4 or 5 guys playing outside and the window still was down. And I know that if he's driving all the way to the end of the street, he's going towards that FedEx. And all I can think in my head is, there's nothing there but bushes. How is anyone going to hear you if he chooses to stop there?
Sure.
And I just lost it. At that point, he was yanking on my hair because I pulled half of my body out of the door and I was screaming at the top of my lungs to the people in the basketball court saying, help me, help me, help me. I remember that when I was telling the detective later on, I said, and this comes for sure from trauma, but I was like, if Mariah Carey has a high note, I was screaming higher because I needed to make sure I was heard.
Sure.
And he got to the stop sign at the end of the street. Diagonally across from us on the left was the FedEx. And directly next to us was the warehouses. And then he made the left.
Towards the FedEx?
Towards the FedEx in the bushes. And I was like, okay, because once he passed the park, I stayed quiet because the guys didn't do anything.
Wow, really? Did they even see you?
I don't know. And I've always wondered that. But when he made the left, I knew, and I have this in my written statement, I said, I'm either going to die right now before I end up in the morgue on a silver platter in the cold. So he made a left. And when he made a left, I grabbed the wheel. And we started doing donuts. And I remembered that I was just like praying so hard. And then he started grabbing my head and smashing it to the steering wheel. And I just took everything in me. I grabbed my leg up as he's doing that to switch it back over. I still have control of the wheel. And I elbowed him as hard as I possibly could in his bottom area. At that point, he let go of my head and he went down.
Right.
I put my hand on the outside of the door. I opened it and I just jumped. I jumped and I just turned into a ball. We weren't going fast. And I just prayed that I didn't get hit. But I was like, I'd rather get hit than end up dead.
Right.
So I jumped. He got control of the car and I froze. I never opened from the ball. I just felt someone pick me up. And then I realized that then I was on grass. And then I remember looking up and it was a guy screaming and a woman and a little kid. And
had they seen this whole thing go down?
Yeah. So in front of the FedEx was warehouses, and one of those warehouses was a man walking a woman to her car with her son. And he was walking her to her car because he was a pastor and an ex-Marine.
Wow.
And he had just turned that warehouse into a church.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
Around 5 days later, they ended up finding him. And he was hiding out in his baby mom's apartment, which had a restraining order, which he was violating by hiding there.
Wow.
And the way they found him was because he passed the sun pass and he didn't have sun pass. So they took a picture of his license. And when they asked him and they interrogated him, they said, what was your goal? And he said, I wanted to have sex with her and then I was going to dispose of her. And they said, how are you going to do that? And they ended up finding in his trunk sex toys, a rope, and ways to break down my body. And they ended up finding him on his phone pictures of me that he would take in the morning and in the afternoon when I would get off my bus, because it happened to be the same time when he would go to work and get home from work. They put him in jail for kidnapping, attempted murder, attempted rape. He got 3 years in ICE, and then they deported him. Around 6 years ago, it was the 10-year anniversary, and I got a call because every time something would change, they would call me to let me know they were moving him. And then, okay, the 3 years passed, they're deporting him. And then they found him in Arizona, and he was driving, and they arrested him. They noticed he didn't have papers. They pulled him up, noticed he had a black case because I was underage. My file is locked and nobody can look it up. I has to have all these approvals. And it went back to the detective's desk that was at this case of the scene. And he said, look, I don't want to scare you, but all it took is 1 second me searching your name on Google to figure out that you live in Los Angeles, that you do social media, and that you're a TV host. I don't know why he was in Arizona. Could it be just because it made sense for him from Mexico? Yeah. But why was he driving towards California? And I'll never know, because all they did was put him in the jail and then transfer him to Florida and then deport him again. And that's all they can do. So
you don't know where he's at now. How long ago was that they found him in Arizona?
6 years ago. I was a 10-year of the probation. Yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's totally horrifying. Tell me how you responded to that immediately. How did family respond to that? How did your community respond to that? Did you have to go through court, through trial, through all of that?
Because I was underage.
Got it. Okay.
And because he confessed, they didn't need to.
Girl, that's good.
I just had to give a statement.
Sure. Well, that's another blessing in the story.
Yeah. I had to give a statement on scene. I had to give a statement written and then on the phone. And then that's it. I never had to physically see him. I did have to,
identify him?
Yeah, from the lineup. I remember that. And I was I remember I was so scared. I was like, what if I don't remember him?
Yeah.
Because I've seen so many shows.
Right.
And I was like, what if I start confusing him? But I remembered all the details of the car. And that also confirmed to them that I had identified the right person, because I had so many details of the car, so many details about him. I believe I remembered back then, tattoos.
So those are important things.
Yeah.
That people need to know if anything horrible like that ever happens.
Yeah.
You were very wise to actually pick up all those details. I mean, that's important to know because when you're scared and freaking out,
Yeah.
typically people don't think of that. They don't think to like take note of everything going on.
Yeah. I just kept staring at the things because I was like, I don't want to forget.
How long did it take you after that to start to be able to even sleep through the night or to be able to even leave your home?
I think for me, the biggest thing was when it happened, I didn't know if I was allowed to process it
Speak to that. What do you mean?
because it was like, okay, I did that, but
Okay, when you say, okay, I did that, what do you mean when you say that?
like, okay, that happened. And then there was school a few days later.
You went to school?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I had to come home and I had a little sister who was 6 years old at the time. Like, you know, have to be there for her.
So you did your normal routine on the bus, walk home?
I got dropped off at home that day and I remember walking into my house and taking a shower and crying a little bit.
Sure, of course
in the
you
shower and saying, when I get out of the shower, you're not crying anymore.
did. You said that to yourself?
Yeah.
Why did you say that?
Because there was so much guilt. There was so much, was it a cause and effect of
What was the guilt from?
why did I leave my house that day?
You had imposed guilt on yourself
Yeah.
for why did you leave your house that day?
Yeah.
And how did you answer that back to yourself?
I didn't. I
You
was like,
just immediately went to blaming yourself.
yeah. And then.
And you left your house because you were upset and you were trying to go to a friend's house.
Yeah.
That's why you left your house, right?
Yeah. I was trying to remove myself from a bad situation that was happening. And like I did so many weeks and so many times throughout that time, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
So then you just associated what happened to you with you leaving your house and leaving the actual trauma that was happening in your house.
yeah.
How is that related with you to like in the years past that? So if you can see there's a relation that's happening right there. I was in a very bad experience.
Yeah.
I fled the experience. I was violated and kidnapped. I shouldn't have. So then the response to that is I shouldn't have left. So then there's an attachment to press down and bear it and put up with the dysfunction.
Yeah.
Because you're now telling yourself I shouldn't have left.
Well, yeah, I think it comes from a lot of the times growing up, I felt like I was the problem.
Of course.
So
let me explain.
I'm the problem again. And then after that, I think I just kind of buried it and dealt with it. Any like tremors and things of that sort, I just dealt with it privately.
Of course you did. That's too bad.
And then it came back up when I was married and we started vacationing a lot to Mexico.
Hold on, you suppressed it until you got married. How many years later was that?
So I got married at 21. I got married pretty young. So that happened at 17. And even with him, like I spoke about it very, very lightly.
So nobody in your surroundings, nobody in your community, nobody in your home, in your family actually helped you process that, or?
No, I think it was heavy for them to process and go through, even though they didn't go through it.
A lot of parents, which I totally understand because I'm a parent, a lot of parents would rather just flush that down, keep moving, than have to actually deal with the reality of something happening to your own child.
Well, I think it actually overwhelmed the parent in the situation.
Yeah.
But then it made me feel like if they went through it rather than I. So like now I'm having to calm you down because you're going through so many emotions. So I don't have the place to go through what I actually experienced. So because of that, I rather just suppress it since I have to make sure you're okay. And you just hearing tidbits about it is making you spiral. You know, it's like the oldest child syndrome. You got to just like fix it.
Well, that's the idea that we form a belief around.
Yeah.
But that's not the way that we should do that. And I want to say, now that you just brought that up, if I can just speak to that, everybody listening, If you're in a relationship where you're trying to express how you feel about something, let's say a friend of yours went through that, okay? And then your friend's trying to tell you their story. They're trying to get help. And all you're doing is saying, oh, that happened to me. You're fine. Like, you're being dramatic. Like, just get over it and move on.
Yeah.
Or you should be more worried about how I feel.
Yeah.
Right? So a correct way to validate somebody, and I bet you would have felt so much better had somebody said to you, I can see that you must have been so scared. You must have been terrified.
It's not that they didn't care. It was more that the people around me in my immediateness were so overwhelmed by hearing from the detective. Because that's another thing too. It took people listening that I wasn't exaggerating, you know?
But minimizing something is a self-centered way to deal with secondary trauma. So as a mother, if I was minimizing my child's trauma, it would be so that I don't carry the weight of that.
Yeah.
It would be like, I can't know that that happened to you because I can't live with that. Because then you start beating yourself up for all the things you shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
So minimizing.
I think that's more what it was. It wasn't so much of like the first round of it. It was more of when they realized what had happened and the severity of it, they were like, oh my God. But then now me, as somebody that has always been like, is everybody okay in the household? And hasn't ever really had the moment to be like, hey guys, I'm not okay. Went back into that same role of, oh, okay, now this is really affecting you to realize what it was. Okay, let me take care of you. And let me not even tell you what I'm processing or what I'm going through, because I don't think you can handle it. Because just you hearing from a third party is literally breaking you down. But in that time, it was like, is it breaking you down because of the fear or because you have love for me? I couldn't identify it.
But see, here's the thing. When you have a person who's experiencing that and not processing it with you correctly, it's not because they don't love you. It's because they don't have the tools.
Yeah, of course.
They don't have the tools.
Yeah.
You've done the work.
Yeah.
You're breaking cycles. You're talking about it. You're bringing this out into the light so that you can move forward and not let this control you, right?
And I think it happens a lot
It does.
In families that just don't talk about emotions or lean on the fact of like trauma is trauma and everyone goes through it. They go up, you know?
Well, they don't want to because they don't want to take responsibility. And I'm going to show you something when you said, can you repeat what you just said about you were trying to balance to make sure that everyone else was okay?
Yeah.
I want you to speak to that because I'm going to show you a diagram of something I think will help.
So for me growing up, I always had to make sure that the chaos was calmed down or that I would help calm the chaos. And sometimes I felt like I was the reason for the chaos. A lot of the times, like I was for sure the black sheep of my family. So when that happened to me, I didn't feel like I had the space. I didn't think that I had the moment to be able to, I didn't feel like I had the moment, and I didn't feel safe enough to be,
Of course you didn't.
Heard, or if I was to cry, if you were actually going to hear me,
Right.
But rather make an excuse of why it happened.
So survival mode's the only method. Survival is the method.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Stay tuned for part 2 next week with Carla.